Yeah, hi everybody. It's good to see some sort of familiar faces and some unfamiliar faces as well, as someone else mentioned. Thank you very much for organising the event and asking me to attend. So I am the Invaders officer at Tweed Forum. It's a large-scale riparian plant programme, the big three, so giant hogweed, Himalayan balsam, and Japanese knotweed are our target species, and it's confined to the Tweed catchment. Although we've heard a lot about species that are all over the world, my patch, although it's small, it seems quite big, and it is quite big. I'm going to speak about the history of the project, because that kind of governs where we are today, and it was a really, really important part of the project. And then sort of some of the barriers and the solutions that the guys before me came up against, and then how we sort of reassess the project and what we're dealing with now. So for those of you who don't know, it's been a very successful project, and it's been running for 13 years now, so it's a really good one to look as a sort of case study for a long-term control programme and the phases and where we've come from in terms of funding as well. It has had some bumps along the way, and we're going to speak about those as well. It's had lots of trial and error, and although it's not been perfect, we think we're getting there, and we've got a good system in place. So the history of the project. The main driver, as you're probably aware, is the River Tweed has a very passionate fishing industry. Anglers pay lots and lots of money to go fishing on the River Tweed to catch salmon. Not ideal if there's a 16-foot poisonous barrier in the way. So this was the main sort of driver of the project, was river access, and people were getting extremely frustrated and annoyed that they could not access the river. And that was, it's not a great photo because it was taken quite a long time ago, but all these white patches, massive white patches, are giant hogweed. So not ideal for a triple SI and an SAC designated river, so something had to be done about it. So Tweed Forum was sort of identified as the body who were going to be proactive in getting rid of this plant. So the original project officer, not going to take credit for his work even though I'd like to, Tim Barrett, he was very, very proactive in getting this organised, as well as the other Tweed Forum staff. I've only been on this project for 2 seasons, so this is my second. So originally the budget of 380,000, there's over 100 participants that he rallied together, volunteers and contractors and all sorts of people getting involved in the project. It's probably the most important part of a project is drumming up enthusiasm and making them believe that this is going to happen, making them believe that we are going to eradicate this as a team and it is going to work. Lots of money was spent on equipment, vital equipment. You can't really spray it without it, and you need to be safe while you're doing it as well, so PPE as well is really important. And that one's quite important, £96,000 from in-kind, or so time, and also direct donations from landowners. Again, we are quite fortunate, so quite a lot of the people that own land and fishing on the Tweed are quite wealthy, and we have very fortunate to be able to tie up that relationship between the landowner and the fishing owner, because quite often the person who owns the land doesn't necessarily own the fishing, so they don't really care about getting rid of invasives. So it needed a project officer to get those parties speaking together and get them organised, and also to make them aware that it is important that they are responsible in controlling invasives on their land, because it's a public health hazard as well as being a natural resource. So Tim was very proactive in doing that as well. As we know, the fishing industry in the borders is worth about £24 million, somewhere was written. So it's protecting that economic resource as well as the environmental as well. So some of the barriers that they identified early on in the project, on consultation with various partners, so gillies, gamekeepers, landowners, farmers, were I'll be the only one doing it. So Tweed system's really large. If you're controlling invasives on your land, but someone upstream isn't, you very quickly lose faith in what you're doing. So it was really important that everyone was aware of everybody else's work, even if you're not going to bump into them because they're 80 miles upstream or downstream. Really important to have that project officer on the ground telling everybody and reassuring everybody that that everyone is actually doing this. And it might take a while, but we're getting there, guys. Just keep on going. So that was provided for them, and in that accountable individual, a couple of people, particularly downstream where there was more invasives, they were saying it's too much. I cannot do it. I don't have time. Particularly the gillies, they're pretty much full time about this time of year and in the summer. So right, well, what can we do? We'll hire contractors, and that cost was paid for out of the project. And there's also quite a lot of technical land for them to cover as well, and it's not safe or feasible for them to do it. So river cliffs and horrible steep bits of woodland that we sort of have to tackle on a daily basis. We were providing them with that service. And also the chemical and the equipment. So that was another barrier as well. So, don't have an knapsack. Right, there you go, keep up. That was very useful. Again, helping them buy into the idea. Here's a shiny new knapsack and some chemical. Come and see me when you need only when you need some more for your hogweed, not your parts. Please, thanks very much. So that's buying into the idea that this is going to work. You've got them set up with the equipment. Go and get crack on. There's a lack of information. There's probably still a lack of information. Various people trying to nuke different plant species that aren't giant hogweed. The sort of cow parsley massacre that happened a few years ago. So there does need to be that person on the ground again to supply that information. I've now weaseled my way into the boatmen and the gillies seminars, probably much to their dislike, but hi guys, this is a giant hogweed, not this one, thanks. So that again, that sort of regular contact, just showing face, showing them what it is actually that they're supposed to be killing once they're certified as well. And that's sort of a really, really important part of it. The certification. So we have trained up, I think it's about 40 odd volunteers now that are active on the rivers and actually go out and do stuff for us that we definitely couldn't do it without them. And we're bringing in new volunteers all the time. There was a bit of a lag period between the first lot and this new lot coming in, so that needed sort of assessing. After year 13, when your main volunteer base looks like the cast of Last of the Summer Wine, you need to sort of think, right, come on, we need some younger guys to get enthusiastic. So that spent quite a lot of time doing that this summer. And then the statutory licensing, obviously that's really important to get that blanket licence over the whole Tweed system on the English side and on the Scottish side. So we apply for that, and then we get our volunteers added on to that licence so they can go out and spray the target plants along riparian corridors. One thing that was really important in setting up the project was community involvement, and we still try and drum up enthusiasm for that today. So we set up river champions. I mean, call it what you want. It's basically strategically placed volunteers along the system who are useful. They know what they're doing and they can feed back information. It's a lot helpful nowadays. You've got mobile phones and you can quickly get in contact with people. So I'm always on the phone, ringing people. Are you alright? Have you got enough stuff? How's it going? If they need any help, then I can quickly assess that and give them some either contracting help or myself and my colleague Alistair. So we picked champions who are willing and capable to do the work, and they also had a huge influence on others around them. Once these guys, who were quite charismatic in the Tweed system, so big boatmen, gillies, that know everybody and chat to everybody, once somebody was seeing them do it, right, brilliant, okay, I'll go out and I'll pull some Himalayan balsam on my bit as well. And we saw that knock-on effect, and I think that's been quite instrumental in helping us get to where we are now. Again, regular visits, quite important. Sometimes they get bored of doing it and just stop and don't tell you, so it's quite important to get round and make sure that they are doing it if they said that they were going to do it as well. And also getting them on the licence as well, it's been really important. And that also, so feeding back to the Invaders officer, which is me. It's expensive, it's really expensive. So we've spent about £1.2 million controlling the big three. There's been a few pits and troughs, particularly 2006 was the local contract labour. They took on the control of Himalayan balsam on the till, so they chemically controlled Himalayan balsam up an entire tributary, which is lengthy. They also took on more Japanese knotweed sites, so it's a bit of the curve that Paul was talking about. The more you look, the more you see. We've definitely found that. The more we look, the more we have seen, and the costs then follow with that, unfortunately. There's a bit of a lag time between 2009 and 2014 where it went up a little bit. And then that's when I joined. So I'll talk about that lag period, and that's sort of why it needed sort of a boot up the bum really, and to try and reduce those costs, because we cannot keep on affording contract labour like that. So we desperately needed to reduce that trend. Where has it all come from? Basically wherever we can get our hands on it. We're pretty proactive in fundraising, and I do spend quite a lot of time in the winter going out or trying to gain funds. The large red one, that was the Curb project, probably all aware of that. That was European funded with the Fisheries Trust all over Scotland. So that was a decent block of our funding there, and that gave us momentum in sort of the second phase of the INS project. The 19% is the HLF, so that was the first phase of the Tweed Invaders project. So that was a real big help. The 12% there, that's been landowner contributions. So we're very proactive about making our landowners reassure that, you know, this is your issue really, it's on your land. So in order for you to be responsible, you can either help us do it directly, or you can give us some cash. Thank you very much. So we do send out invoices, but it's my job to make sure that that information being relayed to them is accurate, because I don't want to bill someone for the wrong thing ever. So I have to make sure that the data that I collect is of a really, really good standard. So what has the project achieved? Quite a lot of you have probably seen these photographs. One thing I will say is anyone who's starting an invasive project, take loads and loads and loads of photos, because we don't have as many photos of when it was crazy, which I really wish we did. We've only got a handful, so we keep recycling the same ones. But we have come a really, really long way, and the Tweed is, in terms of Japanese knotweed and giant knotweed, is looking better than ever really. That's a photo taken in 2008, I think, and that's the same bit. So yeah, we're getting there. We are getting there. Again, not to take any credit for that, because I wasn't around when that happened, but I will take credit for some things now. So where are we now? So we've come from that, and now we're here. We're still going. So there was that obvious cost plateau that I talked about, and that was mainly from sort of contractors maybe getting too comfortable. The issue is when you have contracting team who's very passionate about it, they tend to not want to let it go. So we also had a crossover between project officers leaving, so that happens. So make sure that when a project officer leaves, they can instill that information really quickly to the next project officer. So we had a gap where there wasn't really a dedicated project officer, and so the contractor took on that project officer role. Obviously he's not going to want to eradicate it as much as the project officer. So there was a bit of a plateau there. So that was sort of dealt with sensitively. Volunteers, I said, moved on, got bored, or got too old. So there is a time when your volunteers, if they're in their 80s, you know, they need a younger team member to help. So to help them. So I don't want to say to them, dear old Frank in Cold Street, no, you can't because you're old and knackered. But here's a 20-year-old who can do the donkey work for you and instill that enthusiasm in him and lead him to how, lead him along the way. Getting bored as well is a really big problem because there's not the amount of hobby that there used to be. So it's not that sort of pressing issue where everyone's getting excited and crazy about it anymore. However, there are still a few flowering hogweed that pop up because we keep missing them because they've grown in bramble bushes and you only see them when they're sort of sticking out 16 foot high. If we didn't control them, we'd quickly get back to the stage of being inundated with it again. So we absolutely have to walk the same ground every year, even though it's a game of sort of spot the hogweed. And we need to renew that enthusiasm with everybody as well. So that's really important. One of the things that I've sort of completely changed is how we collect our data, and it is quite important. One, on a practical level, and two, on a sort of analytical issue as well. So we originally gave the contractors a piece of paper with boxes, and they had to walk the beats or the lengths of rivers that we gave them and mark down how many plants they controlled in that area. That was all nonsense that they didn't. They just forgot the paper and they couldn't be bothered to take it. It's annoying. It flaps around in the wind and gets wet when it drops in the river. So I gave all of the contractors a handheld GPS unit. They're about 60 quid each, so they're not hugely expensive and they're quite tough as well, so you can throw them on the floor. So we had to buy 2 sets, so give them and mark enter. It's really easy. I'm a complete technophobe and I could do it. Whenever they see a plant, if it's this big or this big, mark enter, and that would put a dot on a map. So we quickly we swapped them over weekly or fortnightly, as much time as possible, and it gave us more information than we sort of bargained for. Really, it gave us when they started, when they finished, how long it took them to get from point A to point B. So there can be a lot of sort of bum kicking involved if they took all day to get from point A to point B, which was here to here. So I can keep tabs on sort of everybody at once, even though we're in such a large area. And also, when I'll show you a map, when you can quickly see where your points of invasion are and where you need to prioritise your work. So if we see an area with loads and loads and loads of dots, right, that site needs checking ASAP because that's a red flag. If there's a site with hardly any dots, then we know that we can sort of let that one slide for another site. So this has been really instrumental this year, and I highly recommend it if you struggle with collecting decent data from volunteers or contractors. I'm happy to speak about that one. There was also the issue of double spraying, so some of the volunteers would go out and spray their bit and be really chuffed with it, and a contractor that didn't really have the right message would go out and do it again, and there's nothing more annoying to both parties. So I set the contractors up with very specific areas that they were targeting. There you go, and don't go outside those lines. volunteers were the same, so everyone knows what they were doing at the start of the season. Start-up meeting, really, really crucial. Yeah, so I've spoken about the more you look, the more you see. We're definitely seeing that with other species as well as hogweed. So we're starting to see off-site, off-river giant hogweed hotspots, which are really, really annoying. But once you've controlled an area and you're not seeing as much, so you're getting over the area a lot quicker, you've then got more time to get around other areas and just have a sneak and have a look in that woodland. Oh right, okay, there's definitely hogweed there, we need to go and sort that out ASAP, because it's a seed source. The technology used can sometimes be too complicated. I really hate complications in anything. I just like to keep it as simple as possible. In the curb phase, we bought a PDA, which is a handheld computer system, and it was really annoying to use, I found. I don't know if anyone else has used it successfully. There was a problem with only having one as well, so one person would go off and use it, and the other person was there being like, oh, I've got a plant to log. So everybody having a GPS means that everyone is in charge of their own data as well, and it's dead easy. Mark, enter, done. Funding is probably the thing that might scupper us for future generations. As we exploit more pots of pennies, we're finding it harder and harder to get money for the project to continue. So we made a bid to the SRDP, Scottish Rural Development Programme, for an ECAF project. I can't remember the acronym, but it was a collaborative fund. We were unsuccessful in that, so the fund wasn't particularly well designed for us anyway, but it'd be interesting to hear anyone else's sort of takes on funding issues as we're sort of, and about Brexit as well, whether that can renew enthusiasm for invasive species funding. Be interesting. We also have other species turning up, which is annoying. We'll speak about that in a minute as well. So this is sort of some of the data that we can get from the GPS, and this is hogweed again. So these are all either tiny plants or large plants as well. I haven't yet split out the age categories because I didn't want to overcomplicate it, but each one of those dots represents a single plant. So these are what our contractors have found and sprayed. And then what we can do, if you like fancy GIS, is you can turn it into a hotspot map. So I know that I need to go here pretty quickly, and at the bottom of the islands. Also shows us how these plants work, so where they like to colonise and how the pathway they've chosen distributes their population. So it's quite interesting. I can go into the calculation if anyone's interested, but it's quite dull. But I'm happy to let everyone know how we got to that map, because quite often we see distributions of riparian plants in linear lines, and we all know that plants don't grow in linear lines, so that's quite a different way of showing it, I think. Also, really helpful if you've got one of these awkward off-river sites, massive catchment, can never remember the name of it, and I used to get random notes from the contractors. Oh, it's in the Fox Covert. Yeah, don't know where that is. So a dot on a map, done. I can go there quickly. Boom. Oh, some bad language that day. Yeah, this was one of the off-river sites. So just saw one giant hogweed leaf sticking out of a woodland. Hello. And then so we thought, right, okay, better have a look in there. This is one of the hindrances of the project. Find somewhere like that, that's an entire day where you need to spend in there, instead of going to talk to volunteers and do all the other things you need. So we're finding a few of these sites popping up, and this, it's going to take more and more time and effort to get around them. Yay, okay. That's what happens when you spray it really well. So that was me and the guys went in there and did it. I didn't put on 5 stone for that photograph, it was a portrait one I had. Japanese knotweed, moving on to other species. So we do have Japanese knotweed in the Tweed catchment. It's quite isolated population, small bits, but quite a lot of them. So it's quite a bit of a pain to go around and check them all. But we do have, again, GPS log them. Our data's getting a bit better. It was a bit of a mess, but now I've sort of tried to consolidate it back to the GPS units again. I think there needs to be more education for the general public on what to do when they find it. Some people go crazy and start cutting it and then spread it everywhere, because sometimes the cut and spray method is quite successful and we do use it, but I think there needs to be one message only for the general public: just leave it alone, and bring someone who knows what they're doing. That is what can happen if you cut and spray it, and that's a year after treatment, so it's dead. And then we do get, from the flooding, we've seen more and more little stands of Japanese knotweed popping up everywhere, probably because they've been broken off from somewhere else and moved. So again, a lot of walking. That's the distribution of it. So the black dots are the ones that we've managed to kill, the green ones are the ones that we've sprayed this year, and the red ones, that's our job next week, Abby. Yeah. So we're getting around them all, but yeah, so finishing up in the next couple of weeks, really, so it'll be good. Yes, the method of control for Japanese knotweed really depends on where it is. So if it's right by the banks, don't cut it, because it's likely to be moved downstream. But yeah, again, more education needed on that one. Balsam. At the moment, what I'm trying to do is map all the extents of where it is, because we know the Tweed is just crazy, it's everywhere, but all the tributaries leading into the Tweed, there's not that much on some of them. So what I'm trying to do is map exactly where it starts, and then work out whether it's feasible for us to walk down it and hand pull it. And that's what we've been doing quite a lot this summer. Also, balsam bashing days, yeah, good fun. So I've been managed to get some funding through Tesco Bags of Help scheme. It's a good one to remember. And they specifically wanted community engagement. So along the Gala Water, I recruited a bunch of fishermen and some local volunteers to help hand pull. And I want to do more of this next year, because everyone had a really good day, and the little girl there, she's actually got epilepsy, and her dad said she was completely not confident in coming out, and it was lovely to see her really getting stuck in, and I was surprised about her sort of level of enthusiasm. And so next year, hopefully, if we've got more time, I want to do more of this type of thing, especially now we can map the areas. And that's kind of what it looks like. That's the leader water from Lauder down to the confluence with the Tweed. So that's again the GPS data, really, really easy to use. And I just used the DAFL scale. So it's slightly subjective, but I was the only one who recorded the data that day, so it sort of limits any variables. But so you can get a dominant reading down to rare. So it's pretty scattered, and that's quite true of most of the tributaries on the Tweed. But yeah, again, so you need to walk all of that, and that was quite a big day. Longer term solutions, we're working with CABI, which is the Centre for Agriculture and Biosciences International. Glad I wrote that down. So following official government approval, that we released a rust pathogen, which was cultured from India, out into the wild. You can see the sort of tagged plants. We could only plant out infected plants. So we've got 4 sites on the English side of the Tweed, and it was funded by Natural England. And then Tweed Forum did the monitoring on it, so we had to be trained up in order to do that. It was relatively successful, although the cold spring sort of triggered the release of the wrong spore type. So it has 5 stages which it must complete, and it skipped a stage because it was cold. So it's gone back into the lab for sort of new testing. Its ideal temperature is 10 to 20 degrees. So hopefully next year we'll be able to spray it out instead of plant it out. So that was a different type of legislation that we needed. But I think this is going to be the long-term solution for Himalayan balsam, I'm hoping. What it will do is it will reduce it to a background plant, won't eradicate it, but it will let native plants take over. So it will be on competitive levels, basically. American skunk cabbage, working with Stan and David Knott, it's becoming more and more present in the catchment, particularly in the upper catchment. In Peeblesshire, rains a lot, so people have bog gardens particularly, and this is apparently a really nice plant to plant in your bog garden. So we wrote a few articles in the paper, and we had an influx of people saying, oh yeah, I've got that in my garden, and it's along a stream which is a confluence with a tributary to the Tweed. So we've been working a lot with the general public and trying to spread the message that actually if you have this, it's okay, but can I maybe remove it in the future? That'd be good. And we've seen more and more on tributaries and in wet woodlands as well, in the Tweed catchment, and that's the sort of distribution. That's the one down at the bottom, that's Doik. So there is a collection in Doik Gardens, but we're working closely with them about that. But yeah, I think it's going to be more widespread than that, due to the sale of it being quite close in the garden centre. So people are basically buying it and planting it in their gardens. So I think it would be useful for us to have some sort of information leaflet for people, if they have got it, what to do and how to manage it, and also to avoid the risk, basically. Skunk cabbage comes under that legislation that Stan was talking about. It's one of 14 plant species identified as being of union concern, so it's important for us to stop the horse from bolting, basically. Finally, that's just a nice one to remind me where we don't want to end up back, so must keep this project running. I'm really passionate about it, and I'm desperate to sort of seek new funding avenues in order for us to keep the campaign going, because I truly believe that I can, me and the team and all the contractors and everyone involved, volunteers, can eradicate giant hogweed from the Tweed system. One thing that I haven't mentioned is citizen science. I'm hopefully using that again more next year. So now that the message is out and the project has been up and running for 13 years, I get sightings reported to me all the time, and I'm desperate to keep that momentum up. So people are educating each other, and people are sending the message to the right people to deal with it, which is really good. If anyone wants to ask any questions, then feel free, and there's lots of discussion topics, particularly these ones. So what can we do better, what can I do better? I'm happy to receive any suggestions at all. How do Tweed Forum deal with these declining resources? Is there anywhere that anyone can see glaringly, obviously, holes where we can reduce our costs? Encourage more local ownership. So there's a few landowners who just not interested in dealing with invasives or contributing at all. How do we get around that? And what are the barriers? So are there any more barriers that anyone can think of to help people to do more, to stop people from doing more? And then the legislation. So how can legislation help us respond more rapidly? That's probably Stan's forte. But thank you very much for listening.